Hello, this is Brian.
And this is Stephanie.
Welcome to the making and the remaking of a codependent mind. This time we're going to talk about the tool of jealousy, which is another one of those ones where you're like, the tool of jealousy, because it conjures up this negative image. Is there ever a positive version of jealousy? It's kind of like entitlement, what we were saying, like it makes you think, oh, that person's entitled. But with jealousy, it's especially like, this is a painful feeling. How can this be a positive thing?
So we're going to draw on conversations we had previously in other seasons where we emphasize that emotions aren't good or bad, that they are simply signals and they give us valuable information about the world. But we're going to take that a little bit further. So jealousy as an emotion is a signal. It's capable of giving us information about the world. And then when we think of it as using it as a tool, then we have to figure out how to take that information that jealousy is giving us and interpret it and apply it to the relationship. But one of the main points we want to make is that we're not aiming for never feeling it, which is understandable that we would not want to feel emotion because it's a painful feeling. But again, if it's conveying information, that can be important information to have. So we do want to see how to use it. We're not going to be talking about how never to feel it.
It reminds me of a kind of a funny story from my past. It kind of goes along with my whole trying not to feel things. But this was, I think we mentioned at some point in this podcast that previous relationship that we've talked about with Jay, there was this period near the end where we had opened our relationship. This was by her request.
I know we talked about it at the very least in season 4.
Yeah, maybe the sex episodes or
yes.
something? Yeah. And so this was at her request, basically just a way to cheat in public because she was already doing that. So I agreed to it, but the whole idea kind of made me a little anxious. And so one of the things I did to deal with that anxiety was to stall. And a way that I often stalled in the past was to kind of immerse myself in something to kind of distract myself and to feel as though I was doing something important. So I, bought books, I read online, but I had this one particular book that I was reading about polyamory because that's how we were going to do it. We were calling it polyamory, and we were going to join a group. And
that was your version of ethical non-monogamy.
Yes.
It's going to be a polyamorous relationship.
Yeah. And so this book, went into all these different kinds, but it went into that. And I was performance oriented. So I wanted to make sure I performed well, and I was anxious that I wouldn't. So I wanted to get this book to tell me all the tips on how I was supposed to do this. So I did it well.
How to be polyamorous.
Yes. How does one do it? There was a lot of things in that book, and I couldn't even tell you what a lot of it is at this point. But my takeaway at the time, my main takeaway was that watch out for jealousy. That was like the big thing that people experience when going into this with an existing relationship, is that you have to deal with jealousy. And so I'm expecting this is going to happen, and I'm going to have to figure out how to deal with it. Meanwhile, Jay was already doing stuff. Like she had already started hooking up with people, having sex with other men, and telling me about it. And I noticed that it didn't seem to affect me. Like it didn't make me feel jealous. I wasn't feeling what I thought to be the feeling of jealousy in response to her telling me these things. And then this went a step further when we started to go to these functions and parties with this polyamory group, and I would see her interacting with other men in person and flirting and, this physical contact and even kind of sexual contact. And again, I didn't feel jealous, and I was starting to feel kind of good about this. I was like, wow, this is interesting. Like, what is there something about me that, am I doing this well or something? Like, I thought this was going to be hard. This is what the book is saying. Like, this is people feel jealousy. I'm not feeling it. Why is that? And so I went to work trying to figure out why that would be. There must be something about me that I don't even have to do this work.
Finally, you're good at something.
Yeah. It was, so I'm performing well already, and I'm not even, I haven't even started this whole thing yet. Right. And I did eventually start, met some people myself. But yeah, that was basically what I figured out. What I thought I figured out was, yes, I was good at this. And the reason why was because I saw myself as a whole person. And part of that, seeing myself as a whole person, is I didn't need a partner. And I was perfectly fine with the idea of losing my partner. And that's what people should be okay with. That's the way to avoid feelings of jealousy, is that just you're a whole person and you're okay with losing your partner, basically. And so I tell this to this woman that I had started dating, and she thought, wow, well, that's an amazing idea. I think you got something there. And she tells it to another guy that she's dating. And then between the three of us, she suggests that we give a talk at this polyamory event, which was like this weekly educational event about jealousy. They would kind of talk about how to deal with it when it comes up. And then it builds up to this amazing talk by this guy, me, who tells, wait, you don't even have to deal with it. You can just not feel it to begin with. And this is how. And I say this, and as far as I know, people are receiving it. Like, people even came up to me afterwards. Wow, that's amazing. And I'm just like, wow, validation, man, this is great. I really am good at this.
You're good at polyamory.
Yeah. And that's how to do it. Just don't be jealous. Just don't feel it at all. That's the key, right? Except what I learned eventually was that the kicker, the kind of the punchline of this whole story is I didn't feel jealousy because I was some kind of whole person. I was an enmeshed person. I didn't feel it because I didn't care.
You didn't care about your partner.
I didn't care about my partner. I was okay with losing my partner because I didn't care about my partner.
Right. That's the magic formula.
Right. So because it's funny. It's bizarre to me that people actually found this a good idea, because it's like how to not feel jealousy, or how to not fear losing your partner. Don't fear losing your partner. Don't
have feelings for your partner.
Right. Yeah.
Because jealousy really, as an emotion, is described and understood as a fear of loss. So you have a relationship, or you have something that you value, and you're afraid of losing it. And it can be very painful. So if you think of people who understand themselves as being anxiously attached, that fear can be overwhelming, that fear of losing your partner. But yeah, if you don't care about your partner, then you're not so afraid of losing them.
Right. I mean, I kind of, when we're talking about jealousy as a tool, and you're saying it's a fear of loss, I kind of think of an image of like a burglar alarm or something. So jealousy being the burglar alarm in your mind, like, oh no, someone may come along and steal something.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Although the problem with that analogy is that the burglar is coming to steal something you own.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Which is a little different thing, because you don't own your partner and you don't own the relationship. You're not entitled to those in the way that you're entitled to the things that are in your house that you've purchased or that you've received. So it's very different having something you own being stolen from you versus losing something that you value. We want to make sure to make that distinction between the latter, which is jealousy, losing something that you value, and the former, having something stolen from you, which is more possessiveness.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
So you have possessions and you guard them, and you can be afraid that you lose them, but that's different.
I could see how people who aren't very emotionally mature could confuse those. And this actually makes me think of Jay, because she claimed to not feel jealous also. And similar to me, and would brag about it. Oh, look at the two of us. We both don't feel jealousy. And actually, there's this term in polyamory called compersion, and she really leaned into that. Not only do I not feel jealous, I feel compersion. And like on her social media page.
So what is compersion?
So compersion is this idea that you actually feel pleasure for your partner's success, like in finding other partners or having sex with other people, that you find pleasure in it. You feel happy for them. That's essentially what it is. And so she thought that described her as a person, just like she embodied compersion, and would brag about it on social media, and had like a tagline under her name, compersion junkie. Just like, I'm all about feeling good for my partner's success, being me. And initially it seemed to be true. She seemed to really want to talk about our experiences of dating other people, and she was pushing me to date people and asking for details, and she seemed to be very excited about the whole idea. Except eventually what seemed to happen is she started to see certain people as threats. And then suddenly the compersion started to dry up, and instead, in its place, came jealous-like behaviors. Like, if you were going to be out past 11 p.m., you need to text me and let me know.
So you had an 11 p.m. curfew?
Yeah, basically at an 11 p.m. curfew.
That's pretty early. You were in your 40s.
Yeah, and this wasn't something that happened right at the beginning. This was something that happened as soon as these threats started to pop up. I mean, I went back and placed this. Obviously, it's not something I was totally tuned into at the time.
So you had an 11 p.m. curfew.
11 p.m. curfew.
Mm-hmm. When you on a date, or?
Oh, yeah, no, only when I was on a date. Yeah, it didn't matter if I was hanging out with a friend or something like that. She didn't care. It was only if I was on a date with someone. And also, I was to answer any texts that she sent me immediately. So if I was on a date, I had to get my phone out and respond to her text immediately. And then there were rules for the house being, my house, which she constantly reminded me of that it was my house. But when it came to other people coming over, people that I brought over, there was a lot of expectations about how these other people were to treat the house. So the room that we went into, and like these people aren't allowed to leave anything at the house. Basically, no trace, leave no trace. I don't want to know that they've been here. They're not really welcome here. That was sort of the idea there. And then also our money, which again was my money, like she put these rules on that to where it amounted to you're not to spend anything on anyone in any way. So if you go on a date, you have to split it 50-50. If you do anything at all, they have to pay for themselves. You're only going to pay for yourself. And even then, if you're paying for yourself, I have to approve it, right? So you can't just go out and do something expensive.
So you called this jealous-like behavior because it doesn't seem like it was actually motivated by valuing you as a person and feeling scared to lose you as a person.
Yes, right. So it's jealousy like in that it's controlling and it's anxious, but it had nothing to do with me and the potential of losing me. Instead, it was this potential of losing power, losing control over me.
So jealousy being a fear of loss of something you value. And in relationship context, we're talking about losing a person and a relationship you value. But with Jay, it was more about, because she didn't care that much about you as a person and was in fact, yes, please go off and have sex with other people, go away so
Right.
I can do my own thing.
Yes.
But when confronted with the possibility of loss of control over you, that's when the fear came in for her.
So with her narcissistic entitlement, she was entitled to these things that she was expressing these jealousy-like behaviors over. My time, my attention, that you must respond to texts immediately. You can't spend any money on other people. She was entitled to these things.
These were like possessions. And these other people were like burglars coming in to take what she rightfully owned. So she could dole them out. I mean, if she said, yes, you can go out with that other person, because she's controlling it at that point. And but don't spend any money on them, and don't do this and do that, and be home by 11. So it was all okay if she was in control.
Yeah, and that became very difficult to keep, because there's other people entering my life. So that became increasingly difficult for her to do.
So that's not jealousy. And again, we want to be really clear, because we all need to watch out for that in our relationships, both if we're receiving it, because sometimes some people receive that kind of controlling, possessive, jealousy-like behavior, and it might feel reassuring to them as if they're being valued. They're not. They're being disrespected. And similarly, it can be easy, because it is a painful emotion, jealousy, to fall into actually acting possessively or controlling. So we want to be clear, if it's our own behavior or if it's being directed at us, the difference between jealousy and people acting possessively or controlling. But going back to it as a tool, and so maybe it's not a burglar alarm, I think we could really understand it as a measurement tool, in that it can be a good way to take a kind of temperature check on the level of connection and trust in a relationship. And what we're aiming for is a temperature that is neither too hot nor too cold.
Right. And if it's one or the other, then that's a great signal. So in the case of my relationship with Jay, it was too cold. It was on both sides, right? So it was I didn't feel it. And so instead of me stopping to go, oh, what does that mean? Well, I tried, but yeah, what it meant is that I didn't care about my partner. I was pretty straightforward, but that's a great signal. With her, in her case, it was kind of similar, but just that she took me for granted. She thought she had a lock on, and I wasn't going anywhere. So she could do whatever she wanted, and I was always going to be there.
And on the other side, too hot. I think that's more obvious how that can be very destructive, really, for both people, and certainly for the relationship, because it's an indication that there's very little trust or sense of safety in the relationship. So that almost anything is a threat. It's almost under constant threat. And if we use the me, you, us framework to kind of think through that idea of threat, because if you are confronted with a relationship that is too hot in terms of jealousy, that's not going to be sustainable. It is so destructive. You do want to think through, where's that jealousy coming from? And in terms of you, me, us, yes, it could be the other person. That's kind of the classical answer. It could be that your partner is betraying your trust or did betray your trust, and that trust has not been repaired. It's certainly the case that it could be the you part.
And it could be me. It could be just past trauma. I don't trust people in general, or I'm triggered in relationships, and I haven't figured that out yet and done the work to get through that.
Yeah, or it could be the combination of those two people. The combination of the two people and their past traumas just don't work well together. So yes, it could be any one of the, or a combination of the you, me, and the us that's causing this constant sense of threat and this constant feeling of jealousy on one or both parts.
And if that's consistently happening, and if nothing's figured out between the two of them, then that is probably not going to be a sustainable situation, a sustainable relationship.
Either too hot or too cold. Although you do want a fairly low temperature most of the time, as it is a painful emotion. It's just the goal is not to permanently eliminate it or to permanently allow it to happen on a daily or weekly or consistent basis.
Right, and just come up with a bunch of hoops to jump through to deal with it, which is like, okay, we're just not going to ever go out or something.
Certainly. I mean, then again, you go into controlling behavior where, say, yes, you have one person who is just feeling jealous all the time, and the expectation is the other person completely alters or constricts their whole world in order to help that person manage the emotion. That's not appropriate, and that's not sustainable.
And so going back to the too cold, my experience that I had in the previous relationship, there's been very little jealousy in our relationship for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, I think those reasons being that we worked a lot on our connection and making sure that we both feel connected. And we've worked a lot on our trust, that we trust each other and we trust ourselves and we trust the relationship.
But that doesn't mean that I can't imagine it. And I've done that work because I've actually placed myself mentally and emotionally in an open relationship with you, kind of pretending as though I did it with you at the time when I did it with Jay, and to see if I have a similar reaction. Because at the time with Jay, it wasn't immediately that I saw her with people. I was imagining it also, and it didn't bother me when I imagined it. I've done that with us, and it does bother me. I do feel jealous. It's not a great feeling, but also it makes me feel pretty comforted, actually, that I feel that. That tells me that I care.
It's not like we want to torture ourselves, but yes, at the very least, you should be able to imagine situations in which you would feel jealous, which I can do. For instance, if you were to meet someone else and fall in love with them and leave, I would be jealous. There's just no question. I can immediately access that emotion, which is not the case with Jay.
Right. No, it was the opposite, actually, because I remember actively wanting her to meet somebody. It was like that old joke, take my wife, please. That's kind of how I felt. There were a couple of relationships there, especially near the very end, where I was like, I hope this works so that she gets taken away and I don't have to deal with the anxiety of this relationship anymore or ending it, or, just someone else is going to do the work for me.
So if she left you for somewhere else, it would not be jealousy. It would be relief.
Relief, for sure. Which I didn't even realize until just when we were thinking about this episode, but that's exactly what happened at the end of our relationship. We were going to this couples therapist, and that therapist recommended that we see other people. And the same thing happened there. She started dating someone else, and I didn't feel jealous. And she wound up ending the relationship. And I was relieved. I felt other things. I felt rejected, like a failure, all those kind of things, but I didn't feel jealous.
Although we want to make the point, too, that if you do feel jealous, it does not mean that the other person is doing something wrong, or even that they're doing something that is a genuine threat to the relationship, which is probably what the book you read on polyamory was trying to communicate, that this is a natural, normal human reaction, the fear of loss, but that it doesn't mean that you have to unwind everything you're doing. So presumably people who are polyamorous value that experience as well and want to have that experience so that they recognize that jealousy is going to come up because there's the possibility of loss, as there is for all of our relationships, but maybe it's more immediate if you're in polyamorous situations, but they want to pursue it nonetheless. So I'm presuming that the book was talking about how do you find ways as a couple to deal with this threat of loss to, in fact, minimize it or make it manageable for the people involved.
Yes, just that it's a measurement tool. So it's giving us information. So when either people are feeling this feeling of jealousy, this is a signal that they should be working together to interpret what that signal is saying. And then from there, they can decide if there's anything they need to do together to strengthen that connection so that feeling doesn't continue to persist. This is where all the other tools are going to come in. The companion tools, empathy and attention and communication.
And curiosity and truth. So it's an opportunity to ask a number of questions. Again, you get a reading from your measurement tool. Is it accurate, reliable information? It may not be. It may be a false reading, false signal. If it is accurate, is it actionable? Are there things that we should or could be doing as a couple? Where is the fear coming from? Understanding that it's a fear of loss. So both where's the fear coming from and what's the loss look like? Do you in fact feel disconnected? Is that where it's coming from? Is it coming from something in your past? Maybe there is something in your own past or something in the relationship past that hasn't been processed or talked about enough.
These are all great conversations to have. So, I mean, when I think about the value of this tool, a signal that can trigger these kind of conversations, that's a great tool. And there's no shame in feeling something. That's the thing. It's not good or bad. So I shouldn't be ashamed or afraid to bring it up to you.
And you shouldn't be proud and brag to people that you don't feel jealous either.
Exactly. Right. Yes.
Yeah, it's a useful measurement tool. So you're going to want to notice if it isn't in your toolbox, and you're going to want to notice if you're taking it out of your toolbox all the time. And both situations you want to pay attention to. Is it not there? And is it there and I'm just taking it out every day? Right.
I mean, it's a great way to just take a read on the connectedness of our relationship and to figure out any additional work that might still need to be done. Where's some vulnerabilities that we may need to work through?
So a small but important tool is our take on jealousy.
Thanks for tuning in for another relationship tool. And we hope you join us again in a couple weeks.